So now we are starting. Welcome to everybody to this edition of Europe Calling. Reinhard, you are nearly visible. Yeah, now it's better. So Reinhard, to my right-hand side, you can see Reinhard Bütikofer, the chair of the European Green Party, or co-chair. Cem Özdemir, the co-chair of the German Greens, and he was, of course, leading candidate for the German elections. And the reason for this edition, this time from Berlin, is to discuss with our friends all over Europe, members of Green parties, but also our supporters, the situation after these elections. We are in complicated situation. We scored clearly better than most people expected. There were lots of people in the German press who saw the end of the German Greens soon. But that was not the case. We were seen as one of the winners, even if one could have dreamt of a higher Green score. We are now in the situation after the Socialist Party, which is called Social Democrats in Germany, said very early they will not join a coalition government. We are now in the situation to be in a starting position, one could say, to negotiate with the Christian Democrats, which is again divided into the CDU and a Bavarian offspring, CSU, and as well as the Liberals, the potential Jamaica coalition. So the negotiations are just starting. Cem Özdemir, of course, and also Reinhard Bütikofer, for us as European members of the Parliament and also as co-chair of the European Greens, are both members of the negotiation team, which are set to negotiate in a group of 14 Greens the possibility of such a coalition. So far, and that's perhaps important to know, nothing has been decided. We will explain to you, of course, what's now coming up. And we would also like to hear from our European friends. What are your expectations? What do you think about the prospects of such a coalition in Germany? What do you expect from us? And what are perhaps also your fears? So we are open to discuss with you, and this is the reason why we have called for that event of Europe Calling, which is part of a discussion series to bring European policies and European policymakers closer to European citizens. This is, I think, about the 10th edition. Both of you, I think, have already participated. No, for Reinhard, it's the first time, actually, in my program, right? So it shouldn't be the last one, I promise. Cem has already done it, and it was not that horrible, so we joined again. Right. So, okay, I will give you now the floor directly, and to introduce perhaps first to Cem how you see the political situation, perhaps also to describe the prospects of such a possible coalition. And beyond that, afterwards, I will give directly the floor to Reinhard to set a bit the European stage of these negotiations. Myself, I'm the coordinator for the German Green members in the European Parliament and the host of that program. So please, Cem, introduce us to the subject. And it's important to know, Cem was, before he became chair of the German Greens, he was also a member of the European Parliament. Absolutely. Which shows we have not only people who are phasing out of politics in the European Parliament, but people who are on the rising side. So, Cem, how do you see the situation and the prospects of a potential Jamaica coalition, as we call it in Germany?
Well, first of all, pleasure in your program, Sven. Briefly, maybe update you guys about schedule, which is ahead of us. Next week, the negotiations will start. First, we will have an invitation by Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats. They will meet with the Liberal Party. The same day, they will meet with us. The next day, we will have a bilateral meeting, Liberal Party and Greens, because there are also some things, that we want to negotiate with those guys in order to be better prepared when we talk to the Christian Democrats. And then on Friday next week, we will have the first round of negotiations. This will lead us to a process at the end where then we have to decide on our party congress, the National Party Congress of the German Greens, whether we will suggest the party to officially start coalition agreement. So this is not about the coalition negotiations, it's pre-negotiations before coalition talks. First of all, It's up to the party members, to the delegates of the party convention, whether they decide that what we negotiated pre-negotiations will lead us to coalition negotiations. After that process, when we have went through coalition negotiations, that result then again will go through all the members. All the members will decide, we don't know, at the end of December or more likely in January. The members of the German Party, more than 60,000 members, have to decide whether they give an okay, and then we can start with the coalition. So it's first the party convention, second the end of the process, all the members of the Greens. We believe this is important. Why is this important? Because this is not the coalition we dreamt about. The election campaign, as you guys know, we campaigned against each other. When it comes about climate change, we were the only party that was very outspoken in the fight against climate change and the need to decarbonize German economy, and that was against Christian Democrats and against liberals. When it comes about Europe, we criticized both that part of the existing Grand Coalition of Christian Democrats, but we also criticized the liberal party. There were some things that we totally comes about Europe, and when it comes about social justice, when it comes about refugees, integration policies, again, we had a lot of things where we disagreed with Christian Democrats. But at the end of the day, let's face it, the voters decided there will be no majority for a red-green coalition, there is no majority for a black-green coalition of Christian Democrats and Greens, there is either a majority for a grand coalition again, and as Ben has pointed out, social democrats after that worst defeat in their history decided that this time they want to go to opposition. So we have to negotiate that Germany, the fourth largest economy, gets a strong government. If at the end of the day we will end up in a coalition or not, the process will show us. I look forward to hear from you guys what you want to hear and what you want to have included in that process. Thank you.
Yes, and that is exactly what Europe Calling is about. So you can already get yourself ready you can send us a signal that you want to speak with the symbol of the hand, but you can also type in through your chat function questions, and one after the other we will read them. I've seen that we have lots of members from all over Europe who joined here, but we also have some Germans, and please understand, I will first of all give the floor to our guests from all over Europe, because Germans have easier the possibility to see Jem, well, Reinhard you can see everywhere all over Europe. But now let's see, to get a bit the European view on these negotiations. You had also already the first meetings of the potential negotiation group, or the starting negotiation group. So which role does Europe play in these negotiations?
Thanks, first of all, Sven, for running this. Obviously, this is unknown political territory. We're trying to do something that hasn't been done, which means find out, explore whether there is indeed enough common ground to form a coalition between these three, or maybe I should say four, very improbable partners. And in that context, we have identified as Greens a couple of core concerns where we clearly have indicated throughout our campaign, and we have reiterated that since election day, our own priorities. That has been written down in a paper that identify 10 political priorities, and it all starts with climate policy, with phasing out coal, a new transport policy, new agriculture policy. So clearly, environmental transformation of our economy, of our lifestyles, of the energy system and the transport system, that is one core concern. And we say we will go for this coalition if we see a plausible chance of really making a major change in that regard. Second concern is social. we see ourselves as the ones who would have to be the social conscience of such a new coalition. And there we have to deal with issues like housing, which is becoming more and more unaffordable in many cities. We have to deal with the situation of children, in particular with poor families. We have to deal with care for the elderly. We have to deal with access to the labor market. So there are some clear priorities where we, even in these circumstances, we say we don't give up on the ambition to change, to create change also with regard to social responsibility. And our third priority is Europe. And that could easily be the one dimension of these conversations that would be the most difficult one, because the liberals have deviated over the last 2 years, I would say, from their traditional, very conventional pro-European course. All their former leaders were stout pro-Europeans. The present leader has been adopting some language that tries to play favor with people that are doubting the merits of the European project. For instance, he has advocated some financial policies that would go far beyond what the present finance minister, Mr. Schäuble, has advocated, would even be possibly more difficult for all our neighbors. So on Europe, we might have a big battle on our hands, and this is possibly also a reason why the party decided that the European group, the people from the European Parliament, would be involved in our negotiation.
Thanks, Reinhard. I'm sure we will have comments on all this. I have now to move a bit closer to see whether any of you want already to speak. Otherwise, I will ask some questions myself. So, this is so actually. Here we go. Yes, so some of you are already pointing up their hands. So let's see. I will first try with Sonja Suntrup. Let's see what Sonja has to tell us. Sonja, are you with us?
Hello, yes, do you hear me? Hello?
I can't hear you yet.
Mann, Franz.
This is interesting.
I can hear her.
That problem so far.
Sven, do you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you, Sonja, but Sven doesn't hear you.
So I try with another person. Dimitris. Dimitris.
Yes, hello, are you hearing me? Paschalis.
Why can't I hear you?
Well, my microphone functions. I'm hearing you very well.
I'm hearing you as well, but I think the problem is on Sven's side. This is Felix from behind.
Are you following us there as well? Or? It's bizarre. I can't, the connection to the people doesn't build up.
Oh, hello?
Very bad.
Sven?
I will check with my staff.
Okay.
Hallo Felix. Du hörst und siehst uns, ja? Ja. Ja. Könntest du hier mal den Lautsprecher anmachen? Der ist irgendwie nicht an. Habe ich schon versucht. Yeah, now we have it. Yeah, now we have it. So, we'll try again. Dimitris?
Hello?
Yes, now we hear you.
Oh,
problem
fine.
is solved. Dimitris, please give us your views and your questions, and tell us first where you are from.
Good evening from Athens, Greece. I'm a member of the Executive Secretariat of the Greek Green Party. Actually, we have met with all three of you. Sometimes that you've come to Greece. Καλά, ευχαριστώ. We met Jem at the Ministry of and Reinhardt, and with Reinhardt the Ministry of Environment when Yannis Tirons was there. Now he's at the Ministry of Agriculture. So I think it's a unique opportunity. It's a unique. We are at a cusp, at a European cusp, let's say, on Europe's way to the future. Right now, I believe, and we believe in the Greek Greens in general, we believe that it is crucial that you participate in the government, although it is a very tricky situation. As Reinhardt said, this is uncharted water for you. And since this is not an ideal coalition, it's actually a coalition with opponents. So I have a couple of questions. One is, have you thought of how willing, where are the red lines, until what point will you go back, will you retreat, will you alter your stance in order to participate in the coalition? And the other thing is, if you have thought of not taking, for example, the Ministry of Environment. I believe the Ministry of Finance is going to be incredibly important for the whole Europe, and I believe that this is something that you should go after it and not leave it to the FDP or CDU even. That might be a bit utopian, but I'm talking from our own experience from the government that we are participating. That's it for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitris. And as I promised already Sonia to speak, I will also give her the floor, and then give the floor, of course, to Jem and to Reinhard. And all my warm thanks and wishes to Athens. So I always enjoyed being with you. I have to say that. And
very much.
So I switch now off this, and I try again to ask Sonia about her opinion. Sonia, can you hear us? Sonia, please speak.
Yes, hello?
We hear you, yes,
Can
Sonia?
you hear me?
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you well.
I have a question to three of you. I'm from Germany, from the eastern part of Germany. I live near the Müritz. I would like to ask you how you think your work could be with the left party. What do you think about working together with the left?
Okay. Yes, so that is a long issue. I thank you for that question. I give the floor immediately to Jem. And Jem, so what do you say to Dimitris and to Sonia?
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, Dimitris. Now I continue in English again. But first of all, we were very clear in the election campaign that we completely refused the debate about whether Greece should stay in the Eurozone or not. For us, Greece is part of the Eurozone. There can be no debate about that. Because if you start such a debate, what you do is you immediately push back the Eurozone into a crisis, and that is not a very wise idea. Regarding the positions in the government, I think that's way too early. Let's not forget we're in the pre-negotiation process. Then comes coalition agreement or coalition negotiations, and at the very end of this process, we will negotiate if we agree on coalition, who is taking which position, how many positions, and so on. I fully agree with you that the Ministry of Finance is one of the key ministries. I will not agree more on that, but also have in mind that the coalition agreement regarding the content of the coalition is the same important. So we first concentrate on that, and then comes your point. We have that in mind. I heard your message regarding the left party. Let me say, well, obviously there is no majority for the Greens and Left Party or Greens, Left Party, and Social Democrats in the National Parliament. So we believe they're part of the German Bundestag. So we need to have good relations with the colleagues, but there are a number of issues we really disagree. One of them is the way they look to Russia, the way that they look to the human rights. First, human rights is not based on the question who's violating against human rights. Whoever that is, we're always on the side of human rights. Our position is not, that we are on the side of those who are victims of human rights violations when it comes to Turkey, but we shut up when it comes to Russia. We shut up when it comes, to Venezuela. That's not our position. We're always on the side of human rights. There we have very serious disagreement with the left party. Reinhard, para que no
continue with the questions, I would say.
Okay.
Maybe Reinhard starts.
Okay. There is a name which is difficult to read. Yuma Odaka Falush. I'm curious. Oh.
That was the first name.
Yeah. The most of it. So, but just a moment. I have to find him back. There we go. I have to excuse for my pronunciation. Hello.
Yuma, that's all right. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a British citizen living in Berlin. And well, I have a question, well, to all of you, but also, well, especially to Cem. Traditionally, in a German coalition government, they give the vice presidency and the foreign minister to the junior coalition partner, most of the time it seems. And are there any certain government ministries or positions that you have your special interest in acquiring?
Let us hear another voice, I guess. Thank you. Let's see who else wants to take the floor. So I would then have a look to the written questions already. This is horrible. Normally I use a Mac, and now there is no Mac, and I have lots of difficulties here. But this normal with the mic. They both try to annoy us as successfully as possible. It's very hard to read the questions, I have to say. Very hard to read. So, just a moment, I move closer. So, there's a first question. Unfortunately, it's impossible to read who asked it. Regarding the agreement of the CDU and CSU, which both parties made regarding a limit for our German asylum law. What is your point on this limit? And do you guys see this as a big challenge for the upcoming negotiations? Well, that is a big question for Germans in particular, but all over Europe, because in fact, many citizens in Germany spent a lot of their time to build an open Germany. They worked in local initiatives with refugees, and there was a big welcoming movement, one could say, in Germany, which perhaps many of our European friends don't know. About 1 million people worked with refugees as volunteers. So Greens were always the party which also were close to civil society. So this is for us, of course, a big challenge. So Cem, what do you think on these two questions?
Again, thanks for the questions. Well, first of all, have in mind, this is not a traditional coalition. If we end up in a coalition of a larger partner and a smaller partner, it's about 3 partners, and as Sven has already said, or was Reinhard, maybe 4 partners. So that makes things much more complicated. So you have to divide the ministries if we end up in a coalition, those 3 or 4 partners. Having said that, it's clear that wherever Greens are in a coalition, we always have to, take the responsibility for environment. It's unthinkable that the Green Party, just think of our name, is not in charge of environment. But we also have to realize environmental policy today is not only decided in the environmental ministry. It has a part that has energy policy, agriculture policy, and transport policy. So obviously we're interested in all those three fields. If you really want to do something to speak to the Paris Agreement, you need to have a say on energy policy. You need to have some kind of say on transport policy, on agriculture policy. So obviously we're not the only ones who have stakes there. So we have to negotiate that and see who gets responsibility for that. Again, as I said before, it's about content, and at the end of the day, obviously, it's also about responsibilities, who gets those ministries. And so we're talking about ecological transformation. Obviously, the Ministry of Economy is of very high interest for us, because currently Ministry of Economy and Energy is in one house united. So whoever has that responsibility also has a very, very important say on the future of ecological transformation of Germany. And then one of the lessons learned, we haven't mentioned that so far from this election, is the rise of the extreme right, first time in the German Bundestag after a very long period. I don't want to simplify, it's not as easy as it sometimes seems that, the underprivileged ones are the ones who automatically vote for right-wing. But obviously, that topic plays an important role. So we need to have an answer to those people who feel that they are excluded from the progress in Germany. And I believe the Greens have a very important role to play as the center-left in such a potential coalition. Therefore, we're also interested in social policies. Don't oversee that. Very briefly, on the second question, well, it's very important to understand that was a compromise last Sunday between the sister parties on the Christian Democratic side. It's not a compromise with us. We have our positions. I believe the Liberals have their own position. And next Friday, we come together the first time. Now we know what is their position. They know what is our position. And then we have to start to see whether we can get some common ground or not. For us, it's clear family reunification plays a very important role. Why do we say that? Because I believe if you have your children with you, it's much easier to integrate. Or if it's about asylum seekers or refugees, we believe there can be no quota. Because, what are you going to say if the one person that goes beyond 200,000, figure that was mentioned there, is knocking on our borders? We would refuse that guy. Obviously, we can't do that. There are international agreements, the Geneva Court, and we have our German constitution. We're not going to change that. That must be.
You will have exciting talks with them about this. That is
For sure.
that is clear. I would like to give the floor again through the microphone to Vincent, Madeleine, or the other way around. We will see what comes out. So, Vincent.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, bonjour.
Bonjour. So I'm Vincent. I come from France, even though I'm currently in Berlin. I'm a member party of the French Greens. I actually work for them. So thank you. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this. It's a very good thing that you can spread the word and help us understand how it's working and what are your motivations and expectations about that. My question was mostly about point of Europe, the third point highlighted by Cem, and it was about what would be your proposals and what are your expectations as a policy for Europe that could be made by the German government, and how do
we can't hear you anymore. There's a connection problem, and it doesn't seem on our side.
But I think your message.
Yeah. Now you're back.
To rely. Okay, I don't know when I left. So, but part of the question was, what I saw that you relied a bit on Macron's speech in La Sorbonne 2 weeks ago, and how do you plan to manage the fact that the French Greens and most of the Greens disagree with Macron on many topics, but that it could be an ally, in the change of European policy, and also it could be an ally in your negotiations, but maybe not in Europe itself?
Okay, that were very rich questions. I think I give first the floor to Reinhard. Oh,
We go to
yeah.
Reinhard.
That's
Well,
of course it's
sure, sure. All night. We do indeed see the speech that President Macron held a couple of days ago as a positive signal towards all those who want to create a new energy for shaping the European future. I mean, let's face it, over the last couple of years, Europe was playing defense. Mostly we were under attack by the populists, by the authoritarian movements, by the extreme right, by all those who were despairing over Europe or losing faith in Europe. And what we're building now, and as reaction, as a positive reaction against the Brexit referendum decision and against Trump and all they stand for, is a new, stronger, more united Europe. At least that's our goal. And we believe that that needs a lot of active players, and Macron can be one of those active players. And he has already mentioned, he has already managed to put France on the map as an active force in this European conversation. I must say that's a big change from his predecessor, because he never played a really shaping role ever since he took office. Now, what are we trying to do? Macron is not the only voice, of course. Juncker has been a voice in his State of the Union speech in September. There are many around Europe, many civic movements that try to get a hand into that new approach. From our side, as German Greens, we have emphasized a lot the need to change economic policy around Europe and to have a paradigm shift away from austerity towards a new policy of investment for public infrastructure, investment for innovation, in particular green innovation, green transformation of the economy, investment into education and science, investment that we don't just do nation by nation, that we do together in Europe to build a stronger and more just Europe. So that's one element, and we think we can create a new coalition, a new axis between Paris and Berlin in that regard, hopefully, and of course bring everybody else on board too. Secondly, there clearly is a need to look at European security policies. Nobody can challenge the fact, I believe, that Europeans have to contribute more to their own security, but the question is how. And we're certainly not convinced at all that we should follow the request by NATO that every European nation must spend 2% of its GDP on defense. We don't think this is adequate. We think there's a lot of money being wasted already around Europe because defense spending is huge. Europe spends together 3 times the amount on defense as the Russian Federation. So we would rather have an approach of pooling and sharing capabilities and sharing services. So we want to fight back against a new round of huge expenditure that would just feed the defense lobby. Then there is an issue with energy policy. Obviously, we're presently negotiating in the European Parliament over the so-called winter package, which is the energy policy package for the near future up to 2030. And there we want to play a driving role as Germans to achieve the climate goals that we've set for 2020, for 2030, and this climate transition that will bring us to a climate neutral economy. Those are just 3 challenges, but these are the issues that we try to put front and center in negotiating about Europe.
Let's see here. I will try someone else who wants to speak directly. Umit Sain, excuse again, please, my pronunciation. Jem seems to speak all languages. In particular, I had no clue that you speak Greek, or at least can pretend to speak Greek. Umit.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Ümit Şahin. I'm from the Turkish Greens. Merhaba Cem. Bu arada. My question is not about the crisis between Turkey and Germany, but it's about the climate crisis. And I'm very curious about the climate change part of the coalition agreement. Actually, that situation reminds me the position before the red-green government in 1998, that you managed to introduce nuclear phase out with the red-green government at that time. So after 25 years, now Germany managed to make the nuclear phase out at the end. Now I think it's very interesting situation that this time, this new coalition, possible coalition, can introduce a new phase out, which is coal phase out, which is more urgent now even than the nuclear phase out. So do you believe that it is possible to introduce this kind of a coal phase out by law, not by the market mechanisms, but by the law and by regulations until probably 2030, sorry. This is my first question. And the second is, also during this red-green government, German Greens transferred the Department of Renewable Energy from the Ministry of Economy to Ministry of Environment. That was a game changer for introducing the renewables to the system. It was very important. And I think in the last couple of years, the government took it back to the Ministry of Economy. Is this again in your plans in the coalition agreement?
Well, I must say I'm delighted about these questions because it's Europe. If someone from Turkey asks these questions to a German, and I'm sure Jen will not say this is mingling into German affairs. No, it's our European affairs to think about these questions. So that's a great symbol what Europe is really about. I would like to read one question which is very similar and goes in a similar direction by someone who's called Oras, and now it's getting really difficult. Tinkinen sounds Finnish to me. Where do liberals in Germany stand on climate policy in general and phasing out coal in particular? Do you think a Jamaica coalition could raise ambitions on the EU's 2030 climate goals in the Council? So, Jem, climate policy is on.
I would suggest that the second question is answered by Rainer. I take over the first question by Ümit. İyi akşamlar Ümit. Umarım her şey yolundadır. Well, let me say that I fully agree with what you said. We're in power with Social Democrats. We started the phasing out program of nuclear power. Unfortunately, Angela Merkel, when she took over with the Liberal Party, she took back that agreed consensus, by the way, with the electricity companies of that time. And then after Fukushima, she reinvented the phasing out program of nuclear power. Now it's time that we also do a similar program with the coal plants. That's crucial for us. Without such a program, we cannot go into such a coalition. This is maybe one of the most important points, and why also voters voted for us, because that's what really make the difference beyond a lot of other points. That's really crucial, having a phasing out program from coal. Otherwise, we have no chance at all to come any close to what was promised by the German government. And that also then has a lot of components with energy policy, but it also includes transport policy, public transport, bikes, transformation of cars into emission-free cars. That's easier said than done in a country where the car was invented. And finally, regarding where energy policy is positioned, I think it more depends about who has a say on it and what is the content of energy policy. But of course, we could also imagine energy policy back in the Ministry of Environment. Important is the direction, important is that we agree on the goal that we need phasing out. And let me conclude by saying, what I learned from previous governments is it won't work if one partner is in charge of that part of the policy and the other partner is in charge of the opposite, because then we're blocking each other. That is what took place in the outgoing governments, because there was a social democrat minister of environment. She was a nice person and she did a lot of right things and was saying nice things, but she even didn't have a stake in her own party because the minister of economy was blocking her. And I haven't said anything about Christian Democrats. So if we do not agree with all the partners that fight against climate change, is one of the most important jobs of the future governments, we shouldn't.
Before I give the floor to Reinhard, thank you, Jem, for that answer. I would like to put another question to you by Dan Boyle from the Irish Greens, it seems, and he's saying, the Irish Greens took part in an ideologically similar coalition. Our Liberal Party went out of existence while in government. Our biggest mistake was our failure to tie down through prioritizing and scheduling of our policy priorities. How do you feel such failings can be avoided in Germany? So, another country in the debate, Reinhard, please.
Well, first, Olas, I'll give you a short answer, and if it's not sufficient, we'll meet over the weekend, so I can give you a long answer then. Certainly, a coal phase-out won't be achieved without a rough ride. And certainly the Liberals will not be our strongest opposition in that regard. There's the trade unions, there is the Social Democrats, there are vested interests from some companies, and of course the Liberals have so far not at all given any signal that this is anywhere close to their political priorities. However, we are extremely determined that, as was said by our Turkish friend before, this coalition, if we enter into it, and that's a big if, I must underscore that, that's still a big if. We haven't even started talking. We haven't started exploration talks yet. But if we enter that coalition, that will have to deliver on the coal phase out. That's something we cannot and will not give up on. Now, we might be in a position where we have to negotiate how we can achieve that. You will remember that with the nuclear phase out, we also had to make some compromises in getting there, but we got there. We got it, and we stayed close to our goals and stayed true to our word. And this is the same here. Can we raise the ambition on the European level for the 2030 goals? Well, certainly that's what we're fighting for in the European Parliament, as well as from member states. But I would say the greatest weakness at present is the fact that the European Parliament really doesn't have a partner among the member states that pushes very hard for ambitious climate goals. And if we get a government with a green participation, that would indeed be a government that would push hard for ambitious climate goals. Dan, your question, I do fully remember the story of your coalition participation, and I believe that our first stint in government from 1998 on provides possibly a good example of how it can work or how it has to work in order to be successful. We focused very strongly on 4 priority goals when we got into that social democratic and green government in '98. The nuclear phase out was one goal. Eco-tax was the second. Changing the citizenship law of the land was the third. And having civil unions for gays and lesbians was the fourth. And we stuck to those 4 priority goals and achieved all of them. And when we turned to the voters after a rough 4 years, we asked them to judge whether we had improved the situation in the country because of those 4 very basic reforms. And the voters told us, yes, indeed. And we returned to the parliament with a much better result in the second election. And I think this is what we're going to have to do this time again, if we get there. If we agree on the coalition, we will have to focus on delivering those big changes like a coal phase out, like changing the transport policy of the country, like changing the European policy of the country. All of this is a clear determination by all of us.
Yeah. So let's see who else has asked for the floor. Some of the Germans who have put up their finger here and whom I can recognize easily as Germans, they are a bit deprioritized because this is not because we deprioritize always Germany, but only because this is mainly a European exchange. And we first go for the European guests. And I have here, of course, recognizing people's background by name is a bit risky, but I'm still trying. So here's Alex. Alex, oh, now I lost Alex. Here you are.
Living abroad.
Yeah, that is difficult, but I know some of the people who point up their fingers. So Alex Lautaratos, hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Who are you?
Well, thank you very much for this excellent occasion to discuss matters with you. I am the General Secretary of the Green Solidarity Party in Greece. Do you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Very well.
Okay. I'd like to raise the following question. I've heard about cooling down or phasing out nuclear and coal, and we fully agree with this, of course. But I'm raising a different question, which is I haven't heard of, which is related to cooling down consumption. I believe that this is a very important issue. The issue is not to pass from coal to electrical or to renewable energy and keeping consumption as high as it is now. I think that this has to be put in front of people listening to us. We have to change consumption prototypes. Do you have any comment on that?
Reinhard, cooling down consumption. It sounds like the right question for you. We developed together the German version of the Green New Deal, which was not having as a key concern the cooling down of consumption, but a transformation. So what do you think about that question?
Environmental policies are bound to fail if they don't understand the social concerns of the people. And to tell people that are not in a very luxurious position that they have to consume less because of environmental concerns is A, condescending, and B, dictatorial, and C, ignoring their social concerns. So I would say What we can do is discuss about offering other better opportunities, offering energy from renewable sources that is not negatively impacting emissions development and so on. Having recycling strategies that reduce the need to have virgin mining with all kinds of metals and materials. But to advocate the green responsibility for the environment as something that is a dictatorial attitude towards social preferences and social concerns, that I believe is a dead end politically. We have to give people the freedom to choose their own lifestyle. We cannot have a dictate about lifestyles, but we have to offer them the opportunity to live better, more environmentally sustainable lifestyles. That's what we have to give as an opportunity and as an offer. And to talk to people, you have to consume less. I think that's ending in a dead end.
Very hard to moderate in such a situation, but I will spare to transform that into a debate about post-growth economics, because if we start this between Greens, we'll discuss the whole night. But you heard, obviously, of course, one possible position in that, which is for which there are definitely strong reasons, particularly politically. So let's see who is else here. So I take the opportunity to read some more international questions which came in writing, even if there were challenging names as well. So Simon Gergely, and now it becomes Hungarian. Shazasa something. Would you, and the question is, would you change the policy of Germany towards less cooperative states in the EU, for example, Poland and Hungary? And if yes, in what way? Would you anyhow change the huge export surplus of Germany that is hurting Eastern European economies? So that is interesting, that Eastern Europeans complain about the export surplus. We hear this much more from Southern Europe normally. So I got indications from Jem that he would like Reinhard also to take that one. So please.
I believe that we have one common basis within the EU, which is democracy and the rule of law. And everybody has to honor the obligations that this implies. So if some of our member countries take the attitude, and Hungary has done so, that the decisions by the European Court of Justice do not apply in their country, that is undermining a basic rule of the EU, which is the rule of law. Now, I think we have to be very clear and very reliable in pushing back against that kind of attitude. But having said that, I would still argue that we have at the same time to address these issues with a full understanding that we're still partners. And even though we might not appreciate much that Mr. Orban does, he is still a democratically elected Prime Minister of Hungary, and we have to deal with him as a partner. So what we should not do, create a fundamental division between some countries in the East and some countries in the West, or some countries in the North, or some countries in the South within the EU. We have to insist that the rules apply equally everywhere, not have double standards, And I believe that in the case of Hungary and Poland, there are issues with applying fully and reliably European values, and we will continue to push back against that. But I think that we also have to extend a hand of friendship and signal that we are not just sitting as judges about our above our partners, that we're offering a way to find a new road together. So what I do not want to have you expecting from a possible new German government is that it would play the role of an arbiter, or it would play the role of a hegemon in Europe that says who is right and who isn't right. We still are partners, and the best tradition of European policy in our country has always been for Germany to try partnering with everybody and understanding their concerns also. So if, for instance, to be very specific, Hungary and Poland reject the necessity to accommodate refugees and to accept refugees, it is smart, and I fully support that within the Commission there are talks going on about offering options, like, for instance, giving extra financial support to cities or municipalities that would welcome those refugees. I know, for instance, from a couple of cities in Eastern Europe that the mayors there and the majorities there would welcome those refugees. So maybe we can negotiate with Orban that the country doesn't accept the quota that has been agreed, but that it allows civic initiatives or municipalities to accept such refugees with financial support from the EU. So let's try to find a way of creating common solutions, being flexible, showing also flexibility with regard to solidarity, but allowing the principle that everybody has to contribute to solving our common problems.
I may add to this from an economic policy point of view, which was raised as well. That is, obviously, if no German party will make policy to reduce German exports, that is not an objective of German economic policy, also not of green economic policy. But we have elements in our program to raise the investment rate in Germany. We have policies to increase, for instance, the wages for people who are on too low wages, like in the care sector, but also in other areas of employment. We have very precarious ways of working, and we campaigned on changing that. And of course, if these people have more to spend, our imports will grow, so that the income from our exports is not saved and then exported to other countries as new debt for other countries, but is transformed into national consumption, which of course partly comes from our European partner countries. So to put it more directly, if more people who are on lower wages in Germany can afford to go on holidays in Spain, in Greece, in France, but also in Eastern Europe, it will help also the economy in the rest of Europe. So that is a bit the idea, and clearly the high export surplus is not sustainable. Everybody says it, everybody knows it, but the way how to balance it goes through higher imports and not by weakening the German economy. So I would like to read another question from Greece. So we have a lot of interest from Greece. Dimitra and Christina, and now it gets difficult again, that's for you, Jem, to pronounce. Efthimiatou, or something similar. From the ecologist Greens, is there a procedure for discussion of any alternative to the Jamaica coalition at the same period? I think there are lots of people who are uncomfortable with the whole thing, who think, what is their way out, Jem? So,
well, Cristina. Well, I mean, one way would be that the currently existing coalition, the Grand Coalition, continues. As Reinhard and he already pointed out, the Social Democrats, after that worst defeat in their history, decided to go into opposition. And I think we have to respect that. The other alternative would be to go into elections. That's showing respect towards the voters, that we let them vote as long as we get, until we get the results we would love to have. I don't think it's showing respect towards the voters. So part of democracy is that you accept election results and try to do the best out of it. Having said that, that doesn't mean that there is any kind of automatic solution to that. Let me repeat, first have those pre-negotiations with Christian Democrats, liberals. This is something, then we have to look into it, whether that's acceptable for us or not. We go with that result into the party convention on the national level. The party convention has to decide whether we open negotiation talks with Christian Democrats and liberals. The end of that process then goes to all the members. So I think there is a lot of democratic participation involved into that. Let me also be very clear. If you run in elections, you're willing to take responsibility. And if it's true what we just discussed here, that the situation with climate change is extremely serious, the climate crisis is extremely serious, we really need a very good argument if we run away without trying whether we can realize our concepts. I can only, talk about it after I've tried it. So let's first try it. If we see it's not worth it, we'll decide we not go into this coalition. But if we come out with a solution that's justifying this coalition, so it's depending on the content.
Let me add just numerically, there would be alternatives. You could imagine numerically that the Social Democrats and the Greens and the left and the Liberals form a majority together. Numerically, you could imagine that a minority government would take over. Let me just tell you, this is just fantasies. In real political life, neither of those hypothetical options have any realism to them. So we have now the only plausible coalition that we're trying to find out whether it's possible for us to achieve our goals through that. If not, we will not go there. If yes, if we hope we can, then we will. And we will negotiate very earnestly to really find out whether the option is realistic. But if we say no, well, maybe there will be new elections. Maybe the Social Democrats come back and say, well, now we saved the fatherland and we will go back and vote. Nobody knows, but that's not for us to decide, and that's not for us to deliberate about. We have to check now whether with our program and with the support, with the stronger support that we got, with an additional 500,000 votes that we gained in this election, whether we can make a push forward, as Jim said, to realize our goals, which are so urgent.
Okay, so I have still some interesting written questions, and I will try to put them first to Jem. Actually, one of the questions interests me personally for obvious reasons as well. It's just a second. So it was first. Is there a question from Kaishu Tai from Finland? Is there appetite for the AfD, so the alternative for Germany, which is the right-wing populist party, which has unfortunately entered now the Bundestag, to be in government and the Greens in opposition? This has been tried in Finland. So that is something we clearly don't want. So, and then there was another question, which from Tinegre Willemsen. How do you organize negotiations practically? And now the question which interests me personally as well. Will MEPs join the conversation with Merkel? So please, Jem, this is what I always wanted to ask. So
Well, first of all, I'm happy that so far we have a national consensus in the Democratic Party that we do not have any kind of negotiation coalition with the AFD. That's very important because we have a number of other countries in Europe where that's not the case anymore, where the center-right parties, unfortunately, or even center-left parties sometimes collaborate with those who are having coalitions. That's in Germany not the case. But having said that, fortunately, first, exceptions to that rule that is in the state of Saxony, in the state of Saxony-Anhalt, first collaborations with Christian Democrats and AFD. That's very crucial that we take that firewall against those guys. And second, regarding MEPs, yes, one of the MEPs is sitting here, Reinhard Bütikofer. He's part of that team of 14 members of the Green Party who's leading those negotiation talks. Reinhard is there. And, we have me as a former member of the European Parliament, for instance, who's part of the delegation that is focusing on Europe. So we have a very strong voice in those talks, thanks to European policy, and those groups that are preparing potential coalition negotiations. We have a lot of members from the Parliament, yourself, who are preparing the papers that leads to negotiations for us. Europe, be sure, plays a very crucial role.
Okay, so Jem, I was told you have to leave. You spent more than an hour in these busy days, so thank you, and thanks to you. And Reinhard still has some time, so we will continue. I would say until about 8. Thank you, and all the best. And I don't know with whom you will have dinner now. So greetings to Christian Lindner or Horst Seehofer and Angela Merkel and other sympathetic people. So all the best. So all the best.
Bye.
So let us see who else wanted to take the floor. Oh. There are obstacles to moving in that room here. So we have, for instance, waiting for a long time, Katrin Kern. So let's see what Katrin has to say. Hi, Katrin.
Hello, it's Katrin Kern. Yeah, I'm. I live in Baden-Württemberg, but I'm German-British. I have 2 questions. One concerns the transaction tax, which at one time was an issue, and the transaction tax was a possibility of introducing an independent income for the EU, and it's died a death. I think nobody talks about it anymore, although at one time Schäuble was even interested in this project. Would the Greens consider rekindling this transaction tax to bring it back into the picture? And secondly, I'd like to ask the question about the FDP and their attitude towards bank regulations. Even Blackstone, one of the biggest equity and financial services, warned that if the FDP was in the financial ministry and had influence on the banking regulations, that this could result in a further banking crisis. How would the Greens like to deal with this?
Okay, so let's see who else wanted to take the floor. Thanks again to Katrin, and she was, as a British German or German British, she was actually a candidate, a direct candidate to the Bundestag. Unfortunately, you didn't quite manage to get in, but you scored well. And well, let's give the floor to an old friend of mine who was a member of the Bundestag and who also knows Reinhard, I guess, and that is Detlef von Larcher. And let's see what Detlef has to say. You already have some experience in the first Socialist Green Coalition. Detlef, welcome to you here in Europe Calling. Detlef? Not working, it seems. No. Detlef, we cannot hear you. So, Detlef cannot speak for some reasons which I do not understand. So I take the opportunity to give another question to Reinhard from one of his favorite countries, actually, Holly Hart from the United States. How do you feel you can influence a governing coalition to resist some of the scary, nonsensical statements and actions of the current US administration? So I think that is a question you will certainly like to answer. Please, Reinhard.
Well, first, to answer your questions, Katrin, both of the points that you raised will not be on the table for our exploration phase of the talks, because that's not, those 2 points are not included in our 10 priorities. But if we decide that we will go for a full-scale negotiation, then of course those 2 issues will be covered also in the conversation. You said Blackstone warned against FDP. I think it was rather BlackRock. Blackstone is considered, the CEO of Blackstone is presently considering to run for the Senate in Washington State, I believe. So he might not be that much concerned with Europe. But look, it's obvious that FDP and us are on different sides of many issues. If it was just them and us, it might be a very, very difficult negotiation. But we do have the experience that sometimes players from outside the coalition can influence the process also. And this is what I believe we would have to build on. If we are a Green Party in coalition with CDU, CSU, and FDP, and nobody in civil society cares to support us, cares to raise issues, cares to organize fights, then our success will probably be rather limited. However, if we can find alliances with civic forces and with people even from industry that understand now that you have to find some meaningful regulation if you don't want to fall under the law of the jungle, then maybe we can achieve more. Let's wait and see. As regards the US, look, that's probably an issue where all of us are more united than on many others. I haven't found many friends of the Trump administration, neither with the CDU nor with the liberals. Whether we can push back against Trump depends to a large degree on whether we can build bridges with the other America, with the we are still in kind of people that do not want to retreat behind the Paris Climate Agreement, with the people in the great states of California, New York, Washington, and others that want to continue fighting for progressive causes. And as an example, we have decided on the basis of a green initiative to invite the governor of California, who is going to visit Bonn for the climate conference. We have decided to invite him to the European Parliament to address the European Parliament and to talk about what California does on climate and to talk about how we can align in that battle. And I think it's more important probably, from a strategic point of view, to strengthen those relationships, those positive relationships, than getting worked up every day over every tweet that this, what did Mr. Tillerson say? I'm forgetting the word. Moran, I think it was.
Yes, so we are now basically have covered most of the questions I could at least easily attribute to people outside of Germany. But there's still one which I would like to put to you, and that is from Charlotte Berwick. Both Greens and Liberals are advocating a European immigration policy. Do you think that by setting a figure for immigration to Germany, 200,000 per year, the Conservatives have actually prepared a way towards a more liberal immigration law for skilled workers from outside of the EU? And there is a question from my former professor, Ulrike Liebert, and of course she will get her question, so that's the least I have to honor. So, and she's asking the following. So she's a professor of European politics at the University of Bremen. So key for German EU policy will be reforms of the Eurozone that are necessary for making it more robust towards external shocks from international financial crises. Will the German Greens go with the ESM, so the European Stability Mechanism proposed by Schäuble, or with Macron's European finance? So, Reinhard, two questions.
Well, on immigration policy, I'm afraid there's a misunderstanding, because the Conservatives have not advocated a policy that would say we allow immigration of up to 200,000 immigrants per year. They have said up to max 200,000 people would be allowed into the country on humanitarian basis, which is a different kind of story. We don't agree with that policy, but indeed the very fact that they are now advocating an immigration law, which we have advocated for some time, as well as the Liberals, that might open a new door. Now, we don't know exactly how that might work out, and certainly we will not just buy the immigration law and then subscribe to their policies on the humanitarian front. That's not a deal we're bound to make, but certainly that one aspect could be a positive. Now, with regards to the question about Eurozone governance, my answer would be neither Schäuble nor Macron. Because on one important aspect, they both agree, which I deplore, which is that they don't want to go for strengthening the community method. They want to go for intergovernmental governance. And we believe that we should not weaken the unitarian institutions, namely the Commission and the Parliament. So I would be, or to say it more correctly, the Greens are in favor of a European finance minister, but not as an intergovernmental institution, but as a finance minister, as Juncker proposed it. He came close to our position, saying that should be distinguished member of the Commission responsible to the European Parliament and under the control of the European Parliament. What Schäuble advocates is an institution that would take away responsibilities that reside now with the Commission, would weaken the Commission considerably, and would give Germany ultimate control of all budget decisions around Europe, because the ESM presently has a minority veto power for the German government. If that would be transformed into a European monetary fund, that would imply Germany can veto, can indirectly control and veto all budget decisions by all those under the control of the European Monetary Fund. That makes absolutely no sense. Nobody believes that this is workable. Nobody thinks this should be the way we cooperate in Europe. So there we are in favor of community method with a strong role of the European Parliament, not for intergovernmental approaches.
Yes, I think we are coming soon to an end of that program. We had lots of participants. We have heard voices from many European countries, and now it's time to conclude. This will certainly not be the last of these programs during these Jamaica talks, because I'm sure they will take some time. That will not be a fast process. It was very interesting to hear that actually no one said to us, don't do it, are you crazy? I heard a lot of people raising concerns, be it on European economic policy, be it on climate policy, on immigration questions, on social justice. These are exactly the issues we will raise. It is very clear, Reinhard has said it from the beginning, our priorities are clear. It is climate change and the green transformation of the German economy, the stability of Europe, and this means, of course, a stronger European policy which keeps Europe together, and more social justice in Germany. And please be assured that there will not be an easy decision. There will be tough negotiations afterwards. There will be a vote on a party congress whether we actually enter coalition negotiations. And in the end, as always with the Greens, it's grassroots members who decide, because the coalition treaty will be put to a vote. And this means, of course, civil society is very much invited, as well as responsible business and many other actors in society, to raise their voice, put their expectations to all negotiation partners, and have in the end their say. And we will continue as German Greens in the European Parliament and the European Green Party to be in conversation with you all over Europe over what's happening. We know about our responsibility, not only for Germany, but also for Europe, not only for the German Greens, but also for the European Greens. We know we are watched. We are ourselves curious how this will continue, and we will not allow that we do not take our responsibility seriously. And I would like to invite you to the next editions of Europe Calling, which will come up, and you will be informed by email about it, or see it on social media. I excuse today to all our German friends, of whom few had the possibility to raise their questions today. That will be different next time, but that was an edition clearly targeted to give the possibility to our friends all over Europe to raise their points of view. And I wish you a great evening. I thank again Reinhard for having joined the program, and wish you as sleep as possible, until as much sleep as possible until the negotiations come to an end. You will need it, I guess. And there were many who negotiated with Angela Merkel before. Few men survived it politically. I'm confident that you will survive it, Reinhard. I wish you all the best, and see you. Europe Calling will come soon again. Bye-bye.